the beginning of something unlikely. It was an ordinary afternoon, but he felt that the day brought something more, something new, something he couldn't quite identify until, for the first time, someone's eyes fixed on him in a different way. Somehow, he felt completely vulnerable, as if the simple act of being seen was already too much exposure. This situation wasn't new to him, but he had never felt so small. It wasn't shame, but a sense of inadequacy that, without warning, took over his body. He used to think he would never be the kind of person who felt this way, insecure about someone. But there he was, caught between fear and hope, with a deep pit of insecurity opening up in front of him. When he fell in love, he didn't quite know how to handle it. There was something in the way the other person looked at him, as if they had discovered some noble and rare quality, creating an instant connection. But soon came the insecurity. He knew, with an almost painful clarity, that he wasn't worthy of that feeling. His eyes would scan her, and amidst the overwhelming passion, his mind focused on the comparisons. He thought about her stories, the other relationships she had had, the moments shared, the experiences she accumulated. All he wanted was to be the right person, but he found himself lost, distant from something he didn't even know how to reach. He had never felt so vulnerable. And it was in that vulnerability that he began to wonder, did she expect more from me? Does she see what I can't see? These questions hammered at his mind constantly, bringing a sense of despair and helplessness. He knew love was there, but he felt that his lack of experience was preventing him from living everything that it could be. He never had many relationships. The experience of building something meaningful always seemed to slip through his fingers, as if at some point he would always fail. But that wasn't the only problem. The biggest one lay in comparison, in the idea that he couldn't be like the others she had known. Would he be able to handle the depth she had already experienced? He thought about her conversations about her ex-boyfriends, and felt that the chasm between their experiences was too great. As someone who had never felt comfortable with his own love story, he didn't want to be just another name on a list of experiences. Yet at the same time, the pressure to live up to something he didn't fully understand was overwhelming. Every glance she threw his way seemed to be a reminder of his inadequacy, of his inexperience, the doubts that become bottlenecks. As the days passed, the passion grew more intense, but at the same time, anxiety gripped him tighter. He found himself afraid to do anything that might reveal his inexperience. Every gesture he made felt too small, or worse, like a mistake waiting to be discovered. He wished he could be the kind of person who was completely at ease in this scenario, but he wasn't. He wanted to be the person she imagined, the one who would make her feel safe and loved, but that seemed out of reach. It's curious how, when you're in love, your mind starts creating scenarios that would never occur if you were calmer. Every word she said, every glance turned into a code he had to decipher, fearing every moment that she would uncover his insecurity. If he had previously been able to act spontaneously, now he felt like a puppet of his own emotions. He didn't know how to tell her what he felt. How could he explain that, despite being deeply in love, he felt he wasn't capable of being the person she needed? How could he confess that the fear of failing in his romantic experience consumed him? He didn't want to seem weak or worse, to make her think that the passion he had for her wasn't enough. What he feared the most was that she would see his lack of experience as a flaw, something that would make her give up on him. Guilt began to creep in, almost invisibly, like a shadow following him wherever he went. He felt as if he had betrayed some rule of love, a rule he didn't even know existed. He wanted to be more, but more always seemed just out of reach. He tried to be affectionate, to show his love, but the words and gestures never seemed to be enough. It felt as though he was constantly chasing after something, without knowing exactly what. The fear of being compared to the past. The fear of being compared to the other loves in her life was, without a doubt, his biggest concern, weighing on his heart. What he feared more than anything was being just a mere step in her journey, not someone with whom she genuinely wanted to share the rest of her life. And how could he compete with the intense moments, the shared experiences, the memories she had formed with other people? He spent hours thinking about how she viewed the past, trying to find some sign that his lack of experience wouldn't be a significant obstacle. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that she looked at him with a silent doubt, an implicit comparison between who he was and what she had already experienced. He wanted to be someone she could be proud to be with. He wanted her to see that despite his lack of experience, he had something more to offer, something the others didn't have. But the truth was that he still didn't know exactly what that was. The need to overcome insecurity. He knew that for love to be truly fulfilling, he would need to learn to deal with his own insecurities. He couldn't continue living in the shadow of his inexperience. For this feeling so strong and overwhelming to be more than a fleeting illusion, he needed to accept that sometimes the beauty of love doesn't lie in past experiences or what has been lived, but in the authenticity of the present moment. The love he felt needed to be experienced uniquely, without comparisons to what had happened in the past. He needed to trust in what was being built, in what existed between them now, and not in what could or could not be compared to other stories. But how would he do that? How could he stop torturing himself with comparisons and the fear of failure? He wanted to believe that despite his lack of experience, the love he felt for her would be enough, and that perhaps this journey of two strangers surrendering to the unknown would be the greatest lesson of all. He knew the road would be long and that his insecurity wouldn't disappear overnight, but there was something there, a small spark of hope that made him believe that maybe it was possible. Perhaps he could learn, grow, and who knows, transform his lack of experience into something unique and beautiful, confronting his own reality. In those moments of reflection, he began to realize that experience in love wasn't about the number of relationships or the stories she could tell. It was about how he could be genuine with himself, about the way he could allow himself to live in the present without the constant weight of a past that wasn't his. He knew he couldn't change his history, but perhaps, in some way, that made him more real, more vulnerable, and maybe even more willing to be what he feared. Someone who doesn't mind being imperfect. Someone who can learn alongside another, without rushing to reach a final destination. Now, more than ever, he needed to ask, could love be simpler than he imagined? The fear of the unknown. As the days went by, the relationship between the two grew, but with it also came the ghosts of insecurity. He spent most of his time in a constant state of self-analysis, trying to understand how he should act or what he could do to become the ideal partner. The conversations that once felt natural now seemed laden with a silent weight, as if at any moment he might make an irreparable mistake. Anxiety overwhelmed him during moments that should have been filled with pure happiness. There was something deeply uncomfortable about not knowing what to do. He wanted to be able to act spontaneously, to give in to emotion without worrying about what might or might not go right. But deep down, he feared her reaction. He was afraid that his lack of experience would be evident, a weakness that would make her question the value of the relationship. The fear of being discovered in his emotional ineptitude seemed to accompany every gesture, every exchanged word. He tried to mask his apprehension, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The simple act of showing affection felt like a grand production, an effort not to appear inexperienced. It was as if he were constantly on stage, trying to play a role he didn't know how to execute properly. Meanwhile, she, with her experience and wisdom gained from previous relationships, seemed to have a natural understanding of how to surrender to love. She didn't worry about the little insecurities that consumed him. To her, life seemed simpler, more natural. She seemed to see what he couldn't see in himself. Perhaps that was what made him feel so afraid, the idea that he could never reach the ease with which she surrendered, without the issues that tormented him. He couldn't help but wonder, does she notice the difference between us? Does she see my lack of experience and perhaps feel let down by it? The challenge of self-acceptance. It was then, in a moment of deeper reflection, that he realized something he had previously ignored. His biggest obstacle wasn't his lack of experience, nor the fear of comparisons, but rather the difficulty of accepting himself as he truly was. He looked in the mirror and saw only a reflection of someone who had never allowed himself to be fully vulnerable in a relationship. He had lived his life with a shield up, always avoiding surrendering completely to love for fear of getting hurt. However, with her, he felt something different. He felt that he might be more than the scars of his past. He sensed that the connection between them was something that transcended the limitations of prior experiences. But for that to happen, he needed to allow himself to accept that his inexperience wasn't a weakness, but rather a part of what made him who he was. If he couldn't embrace his own vulnerabilities, how could he expect someone else to? It was hard to admit it, but he finally understood. His journey didn't have to be a race to achieve something he didn't yet comprehend. He could take his time, learn gradually. And maybe love didn't need to be a formula of correct steps or perfect memories. Love could be a daily construction, made of trial and error, but mostly of acceptance. And in that moment he made a decision. He would no longer be a prisoner of comparison or doubt. He would allow himself to be vulnerable, to let her see not just his insecurities, but also his willingness to learn and grow alongside her. Perfection didn't exist, and perhaps that was what made love real. The beauty in imperfection, the surrender amidst the fear, and the revelation. It was a quiet night, the kind of night where words seemed to flow easily. He was with her, sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars, when the need to share his internal struggle became urgent. Without further ado, he looked into her eyes, and with an honesty that surprised him said, "I'm scared. Scared that no matter how much I want to be what you need, I might not be able to. I know I haven't lived much, and that makes me insecure. I keep thinking that maybe you have something more in your heart, something I can't offer because my heart is still trying to understand what it means to be completely free to love." He paused for a moment, trying to discern whether he had said the right words, if he had exposed himself honestly enough. She looked at him and for a moment said nothing. He felt a wave of dread sweep over his chest, but then she leaned closer to him, with the lightness that only someone truly in love can have. "You know," she said calmly, "I have my insecurities too. Maybe what you don't see is that often it's the inexperience that brings the beauty of genuine love. We don't need a perfect script. We don't need to be like everyone else. What matters is that when we're together, something good happens. You, with your vulnerability, teach me to be more open, more genuine, more willing to live in the moment, and that's what I want. The rest, we'll build gradually." These words touched his heart in a way he never thought possible. He felt an immediate relief, as if all the weight he had been carrying for the past few weeks was finally lifted off his shoulders. She wasn't comparing him to others. She didn't see him as a potential mistake, but as someone with whom she wanted to learn to live. And in that moment, something changed inside him. He didn't need to be perfect. He didn't need to be like her other loves. He just needed to be himself. The beginning of a new journey. The insecurity that consumed him didn't disappear overnight, but something inside him transformed. He learned that love isn't about what one has or what one has experienced, but about what is built together, about the shared journey. He and she weren't perfect, but together, they could be something much stronger and more real than any ideal of love he had in mind. From that moment on, he knew that his greatest challenge would be to continue being authentic, even in the face of doubt, and to trust that sometimes the greatest love experience is the one lived in the present. And maybe one day, he would look back and see that his love story with her was the greatest lesson of all. Do you see yourself in any part of this story? The insecurity, the fear of not being enough, the comparison with the past. We all go through these moments of vulnerability in love. But remember, the true beauty of a relationship lies in authenticity and the journey shared. If you are ready to experience love without comparisons and allow yourself to learn with every step, don't be afraid to take the first step. The truest experience begins now. Take that step and build the love you deserve.